Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 9 of 11 Days of Global Unity, a special program that we've been developing here at Humanity Rising with 11 Days of Global Unity and We the World and the Sign Network and scores of other organizations globally that have come together during this very profound period between 9/11 this year. We are commemorating the 20th anniversary of 9/11 to September 21st, which is the International Day of Peace. And we're going to get to that on Tuesday, the grand finale, the International Day of Peace. Today, we want to contemplate the issue of freedom. And I'd like to begin with just a brief contemplation of freedom, beginning in light of what just happened in Russia. You know that there's an election that's commencing in Russia that has been orchestrated by Vladimir Putin and his cronies. Alexander Navalny, who is in prison for speaking out against Vladimir Putin and revealing the corruption of the current regime, was trying to organize from prison, and with great heroism and courage, finally got an app up on Google and Apple so that the people around Russia could see who was on the ballot and vote strategically for the one candidate that might make it possible to defeat the local Putin candidate. And just as the election began, what happened? Google and Apple, American corporations, colluded with the Putin government and turned off the apps. So I want to raise in our collective mind today, what is the meaning of freedom when all you have to do is take away an app and it disappears? Freedom. I think it's worth noting also that freedom takes on a completely different shape when there's no more privacy. Every call that we make, every text that we send, every WhatsApp chat, every email is recorded permanently in vast archives. And the major corporations and the governments are listening in. What does freedom mean when there's no more privacy? That's a very profound question. And finally, as we get started this morning on this great issue of freedom, I would like to ask what freedom means when we're no longer consumers, we're commodities. Because every choice we are now making in our freedom is being recorded, and companies like Facebook know more about us now than our closest friends and even spouses. So our acts of freedom, because they're all being recorded and used to turn us into commodities, make compelling the question of what freedom makes in a commodified, no privacy, if you take the app away, the freedom disappears kind of a world. Freedom used to be the freedom to vote, freedom to speak, freedom to act without coercion in privacy. And those contextual frameworks about freedom no longer exist and have been morphed virtually beyond recognition. So one of the challenges for our generation in this kind of a world, where governments are increasingly using coercive force, where corporations know the intimacy of our thoughts and our communications, and where democracy is being mediated increasingly through social media, how we understand freedom and how we reimagine freedom may be one of the most important things that we do as human beings. So this is an issue that is worth contemplating as we honor some of the agents and stalwarts and champions of freedom today on this 9th day of 11 days of global unity. Before we commence our program, let us pause as we always do. Let's just take a moment in the tumult of this world and just center yourself in your body. Take a breath, close your eyes, and attune yourself to your heart for just a minute. Listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive. And out of the attunement of your heart, send love to everyone you can think of, just for a minute. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude and love for each and every one of you who are joining our session today, I want to turn our program now over to my good friend and colleague, Rick Ulfik, who, as you know, many of you, is the co-founder of 11 Days of Global Unity since 2004, when they initiated this extraordinary program, bridging 9/11 and the International Day of Peace. He's the founder of We the World, and has been really on the front lines of social justice and social activism for most of his adult life. Although he's also, as I discovered yesterday, a very accomplished musician and pianist. And so one of these days, Rick, we want to get you on Humanity Rising and provide a concert or some music out of that awesome talent of yours. So welcome to Humanity Rising, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And, you know, I wanted to add a couple of thoughts about freedom that to what you also were talking about before, with the loss of privacy and various other things. There are a few other disturbing trends that I've noticed. in the United States that I feel represent a dangerous erosion of freedom and democracy. One is gerrymandering, where the people, where the
Absolutely.
politicians are choosing the voters instead of the voters choosing the politicians. There's voter suppression. There's also
Absolutely.
the electoral college has, many issues related to it. There's unlimited money in politics, and the Senate, where 41 senators that represent only 21% of the country can block legislation that large majorities of people want and need for their families and communities. So what I'm worried about is this is kind of a trend towards minority rule. And we're getting so close to that, we could be reaching a tipping point where within 2 elections, we could be losing whatever freedom and democracy that we have at this point. Would you say?
I would completely agree. The point that you're making, that politicians are now choosing the voters rather than the other way around, both through gerrymandering and the suppression of the vote, as the controlling groups find themselves increasingly out of tune with the emerging multicultural demographic in the United States. They're just excluding the demographics that they don't want to participate. And we're watching it happen right before our eyes. And whether the US Senate will pass the Voting Rights Act will be a critical determinant as to whether democracy survives in the United States into the 2022 election and 2024. And you're absolutely right, Rick. We're at a tipping point, not only in terms of climate change and many other ecological trends, but we're at a tipping point in terms of democracy in this country around the vote. It's terrifying when you really look at it. And then I would add the freedom of a woman over her own body, which is now under assault at the Supreme Court. It's already been eradicated in the state of Texas, and at least a half a dozen other states are legislating copycat bills, replicating Texas suppression of the freedom of women over their own bodies. So this question of freedom that we're contemplating today could not be more important. Absolutely.
Exactly. And, at the session after this, the 1 p.m. Eastern Time summit panel on freedom, we're going to be going into this in great depth with Rabbi Michael Lerner and Peter Gable, and of course, Yvette, who is with us today.
Beautiful.
So we will be doing that. We're also going to have a panel later called Political Polarization and the Future of Freedom and Democracy. So that's another factor, the polarization and the media and all of that keeps all of these things in place, kind of, because so we've got all these factors going on that influence freedom and democracy.
Well, another factor that just came to my attention yesterday in some polling that they've been doing is the utility of the big lie in all of this, and how Trump's big lie about the 2020 campaign has now become the official playbook of the entire Republican Party. And the candidates that are going to be running in 2022 are all being qualified by whether they support the big lie. And if you talk to Republicans who voted for the impeachment of Donald Trump, most of them are not running for re-election. and they'll tell you that the Republicans know this is a big lie. They know it's a big lie, but they're implementing it for precisely the reason that you stated initially, that it's needed to suppress the vote. It's needed to justify eliminating more and more people from the voting rolls because of so-called fraud. So they're manipulating consciously a big lie in the spirit of the Nazis. We remember the Goebbels and Hitler, and Goebbels' famous statement that the bigger the lie, repeated over time, the easier it is for a mass of people to believe it. And so we're in a situation reminiscent of actually the rise of Nazism in the 30s here in the United States today. And so it's well worth seeing that all these issues are synergizing together, whether it's depriving the Russian freedom citizens from apps, to commodification, to gerrymandering, to suppressing the right of a woman to abortion, to eliminating voters of color and young people from the voting rolls. These are all synergistically coming together to conspire against any real meaning about freedom as we move into the decade of the 2020s. It's extremely concerning and requires our constant vigilance, I would say, in order to maintain even a semblance of the freedom that we once had.
Exactly. And you know, the big lie that you're talking about has been compared to the myth of the lost cause coming out of the Civil War.
Exactly.
And how many years has it been since the Civil War? And there's still this myth that, you know, the northern armies just suppressed the southern states to suppress their freedoms, and that it wasn't about slavery and all of that. So some people are saying that same myth of the lost cause of the 2020 election is a comparable thing that is being used.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even in the state of Texas, right, when they were suppressing the right of women, they've also legislated, so it's now illegal to talk about critical race theory. And they've also requested that the US Supreme Court eliminate protections against Native American children from being taken from their families and re-educated in Christian white families. So this attack is orchestrated consciously at a time when the Trump faction has completely taken over one of two major parties in the United States with a very specific agenda, conscious agenda around eliminating democracy as we know it. We even saw it yesterday with the protest around January 6th at the US Capitol, where they had to put fences up, and the Republican Party now is with one voice saying that these were actually heroes on January 6th. They weren't attacking the police. They were kind of kissing and hugging the police. And it was really Antifada and the Black Lives Matter guys that were creating all the Sturm and Drang, even though everyone saw around the world on television what the truth was. The majority, 2/3 of the Republican Party now believe that it didn't happen in the way that it obviously transpired. So the manipulation of the psyche with mass media and repetitive lying is as powerful today as it was in the 1930s, nearly 100 years ago. And it's something that we should all take into consideration as we contemplate what freedom actually means in our programming today. It's a major, major issue of our time.
right. And the fact that we have these media bubbles that people are in, where one bubble does not necessarily, it's using what's going on for political purposes as opposed to giving uh, objective information, and that's really dangerous. And so this polarization, it affects everything. So these things are all interconnected, and rather than become dejected and despairing, I think it's important for people who are watching this and our friends to somehow get involved and do something, support groups that are working on this, even start conversations and let others know that you're having conversations, even just talking to people even that you don't agree with. It's important to get this talked about, because if we try to kind of ignore these things and hope that somehow some people will take care of it and it'll be okay, I think we all have to step up at this moment, because we're, with the climate tipping points and the mass extinction of species tipping points coming up, all of these things we can't really deal with if we don't have the freedom and democracy that we need to address these things.
Well, I would add one thing. I was going to bring it up at the end, but you've just opened up, the other side, the opportunity in this crisis, everyone, is what we're doing today. I mean, here you have Rick back in New York. You've got Yvette on the East Coast. I don't know where Teresa's coming in from, but we're going global. Yesterday, we heard someone from South Africa and Pakistan and Botswana and so forth and so on. So the very internet of things that on the one hand can be used to commodify us is also allowing us to communicate interactively with anybody anywhere in the world with a potential capacity to organize a people's revolution. So what we're doing this morning on the 9th day of the 11 days is an exercise in the kind of freedom that we need to do more and more of, because the crisis that's enveloping us, that we've just described, is also an extraordinary opportunity for human renewal if we seize it, and if we implement all the potentials for organizing and information sharing and community building that are inherent in the technology itself.
Exactly. Okay, so let's continue on with our tribute to the change agents working with freedom and all of these 11 campaigns. And first, I definitely want to thank you, Jim, and Rick Buckley behind the scenes, along with Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising, for broadcasting all of these 11 days of Global Unity Summit panels, and for offering master's degree scholarships in peace and tolerance, as well as regenerative action for our volunteers working on these campaigns. And these scholarships are being offered in honor of our dear friend, Avon Madison from Pathways to Peace for the 11 days of Global Unity. As Jim said earlier, my name is Rick Ulfik, and I'm founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. And I'm the co-creator of 11 Days of Global Unity with my dear friend, Troy Lush. You can find out about all of the 11 Days of Global Unity broadcasts and events by going to we.net. And we invite you to collaborate with us as a volunteer and as an organization partner as well. Just go to we.net. Now, let's introduce and announce today's scholarship award. And before we give out the award, Jim, would you like to give an overview of these scholarships that Ubiquity University is awarding to We the World's change agents?
Sure. Just to take a moment, in thinking about it in terms of freedom, the programs that we're developing, everyone, are really designed as a Wikipedia. They're designed to allow people, in terms of the masters in regenerative action, as well as the masters in tolerance and peace studies, to come together through the auspices of Ubiquity University. But the content that's being provided for the students is coming from all over the world. So we're welcoming scholarships from 11 days that Rick and Callum have been selecting from their staff and colleagues all around the world. It's an extraordinarily diverse, very bright group of people, and the content is being developed as the program itself unfolds. So if any of you have content that you want to contribute to the training of young people of all ages around the world that want to look into a master's degree in regenerative action, which is linking knowledge to action. So there's no final test. It's a final impact project around regeneration. And similarly with tolerance and peace studies, we want to link knowledge with action, because that's what the current world situation and crisis demands. So this is a people's program, and we're delighted to have people from around the world participate.
Okay, so today we are very proud to award the master's degree scholarship to Didier Nishimirimana. And Didier is in Burundi. He is an environmental justice advocate committed to educating communities for strong environmental stewardship. He has been working with 350.org, the Mother Earth Project, and Citizens Climate Lobby. He is also a We volunteer and started a branch of We the World in Burundi. And he is a current Green Faith Fellow in a one-year program that equips future educators of religious and faith leaders on climate justice advocacy. Recently, he conducted a workshop on the theme Tanganyika Lake Protection for Economic Sustainability in Burundi to raise awareness on the Tanganyika Lake waters threats. Didier has already traveled to Kenya, Benin, Togo, and Rwanda for related issues. Didier is very grateful to Ubiquity University for this wonderful scholarship opportunity. Do we have a video to run from Didier?
My name is Didier Shimirimana, a lawyer by profession, committed to contributing in sustaining peace in Burundi by promoting the justice for all. In fact, Burundi is one of African countries that has been facing political and civil war, and peace and tolerance are great issues since long ago. Beside the political and civil war, the injustice that has always caused mistrusts of litigants is a worrying parameter of insecurity. Citizens have been killing each other because they do not bring their conflicts in courts, but decide their long settlements. Then I'm contributing in promoting peace in Burundi through a project entitled Mpumuriza. Mpumuriza is a Burundi term, Yeah, that consists a project that consists of promoting non-violent communication in the midst of police and justice providers so that litigants regain confidence. This is the reason why I'm very proud and interested in getting a scholarship of master's studies in tolerance and global peace. And then I appreciate the initiative of the Ubiquity University, and also I appreciate the confidence of the trusts of with the world that invited me to express the interest in this scholarship. Thank you very much.
That's great. It's so wonderful to hear from Didier. And as Jim was saying, it's so wonderful that we are able to collaborate in this way and offer scholarships to people from around the world, like Didier in Burundi. So today, on our Day for Freedom, we're excited to bring you our tribute to changemakers working on We the World's campaign for freedom and other campaigns too. And we have two people to introduce you to. The first is Yvette Dubelle, and then also Therese Castro. So let's start with Yvette. Yvette Dubelle is an engaging speaker, presenter, published author, artist, researcher, and strategy consultant with decades committed to leading social innovation initiatives. Yvette is coordinator of We the World's campaign for freedom and producer of the podcast series Freedom Matters, which is part of the podcast It Matters on anchor.fm/it-matters. Welcome to the broadcast, Yvette Dubelle. And Yvette, what has motivated you to do this important work that you've been doing all this time?
Hi, thank you, Rick, for that wonderful introduction. I don't I thought I had an answer to that. But now that I'm thinking about it, as you guys were talking, I think I just was very aware of these sorts of issues. And one of the things that I thought was, I've been thinking about lately, you guys were talking about the threat of minority rule. And one of the first things that I got engaged in was collecting petitions to pressure American companies to divest from apartheid South Africa. And as you and Jim were talking, I was wondering who's going to collect petitions for us to stop us from, being taken over by a minority rule that is looking to impose some sort of, I don't know if we want to call it apartheid just yet, but through exclusion and oppression, that's basically what apartheid is. And it's sort of, I was just thinking like how we're about to have our 31st and 32nd anniversary. And so our first date was actually collecting petitions. I was collecting signatures for the petition for apartheid South Africa. And now here we are.
And you met your husband?
Our country.
And you met your husband that way?
Well, that was our first day. That was what I had planned to do that day. And we were on a date. So
well, that's
we told the story
remarkable.
In an article about love at first sight. And he wasn't into that sort of stuff. But yes, he introduced himself as my future husband. We tell this story.
Wow.
I actually mentioned it in the book, A Cure for Racism, which was the Freedom Campaign's 20 days of peace, 21 days of peace. Is it 21 or 20 days? Isn't it 21 days of peace?
For what?
Our MLK.
Oh, the MLK. Oh, yeah. So that's That's
So that
40
was my
days.
project.
40 days of
40
peace
days. That's it. 40 days of peace.
in January, right?
Right.
Starting
So
on
during that,
MLK's birthday.
so since then, I had been thinking about that memory because I share that story about my husband and I that we shared. in the
And
Wall
do you
Street
want to
Journal.
say you know, you're in an interracial marriage, right?
Yes, I am in an interracial marriage.
I mean, I think I think that's
no,
important to let people know. Yeah.
I'm in an interracial marriage living in the South. Yes. And so it was interesting that that was our first date, you know, but it was also meaningful, you know, like for women out there, that's a good test for a first date if you're in an interracial relationship. So, and it's just sort of ironic that we are at this moment in our country that I never imagined, you know, all these things happening that I never thought would happen. And I saw in the comments people talking about the need for more people to understand the money driving these political actions. And that's something that we're going to be looking at doing. There's a journalist that does a really great newsletter. I think it's called Popular Information. He does a great job of really deep diving into corporate taxes and highlighting which companies are supporting what. And so I think that in terms of what Google and Apple have just done as consumers, we really need to, and shareholders in particularly, people who are in this movement who are shareholders have a lot more power really than we as consumers do to pressure companies. I think that it was just, I've always cared about this stuff. I think since about 15 or so, I got involved as an Amnesty International volunteer. And I can't really say that things have gotten a whole lot better. You know, it's like you have these, you know, it seems like you're going like 2 steps forward, you know, 3 steps back kind of a thing. That keeps you engaged because it seems like I've had times where I felt burned out, but then something it happens and it's like sitting out isn't an option.
Definitely, definitely. So I'm just kind of curious, you know, you're doing all this stuff. Does your husband do things like this too? Or he's like got his own separate life and he says,
He supports me.
Let me know what's going on. And it's so funny because my other half, Sefi, she, you know, we have very different lives. And when we started going out 12 years ago, she would explain to other people, Rick fixes the world, I fix my kitchen.
That's a really nice way of putting it. Well, I don't know, you know what? We don't really know many people who would, most of the people that we encounter, I'll put it this way, wouldn't touch what, you know, I do with a 10-foot pole. Nobody wants to get into a deep, you know, around here, people say you never talk religion, never talk politics. And if you don't, then you don't have a very deep conversation. You don't have a very deep relationship if you avoid those things. But for several years in my marriage, we did not talk politics.
At all?
I would say 10, 15 years. We didn't even watch the news together.
But wait, how do you're in what, North Carolina?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you avoid talking about stuff being in an interracial couple in
Nobody ever wants to talk about that.
No, but I'm saying you have to deal with the public, right? Isn't there stuff that happens there?
We don't really have much of a social life here, honestly. We are sort of an entity unto ourselves. Most of my friends don't live close by. My husband, up until recently, traveled most of the time for work. So our lives didn't really feel like they were here, I guess, in a lot of ways. Just our home was here. My mom and my brother are here, which was why I came back. Well, actually, no, that's not totally true. I did come back largely for family, but also I came back because I thought that the work I was doing in Atlanta, North Carolina needed it so much more. But then when I got here, it sort of seemed to me, well, I guess the reason that I sort of stepped back in a large way was the community did not want to be the kind of community I could see was possible, sort of like my vision for the world. Was not one that most people shared. And I don't know if it's still there, but we used to have a sign that said, "We're building an inclusive community." And I used to hate that sign. It was like, no inclusive community needs to put that sign up. And all of the things that have been done and the meetings that I had. I met with a city planner once for this project that I worked on for several years. And he told me flatly after several meetings, before meeting with some city council people, that frankly, because I was asking for some information and he didn't want to give it to me, but then somebody else told him to give it to me. And so during that meeting where he's turning over this information, he said, you know, frankly, the people that you're advocating for are not a priority. They're not a political priority for anybody here. And there was part of what the meeting was about was there were federal funds that were available that I had talked to the head of our state HUD, our HUD director, I guess is what he was called. And so the money was in our state. And so I was trying to push, it was money that nonprofits could not access. And that's how they control these things in North Carolina. There's a lot of money you can't access without the city council or the county commissioners. And so you have to sell them on it and get them on board. And so he was telling me before they came in, like, the people that you're advocating are not a priority and like nobody cares about them. And that basically, you know, they were all only cooperating with me at this point because like their bosses had told them to, essentially.
Wow. So, you know, you're very much involved with the arts, right? And I would love people to know about your interests, what you've done with the arts. And I think you were doing some using the arts in ways to talk about racism, right, a little bit, and also the Freedom Film Festival that you produced last year, and there's all kinds of things having to do with the arts. And you're an artist yourself, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you going to ask me a question? I'm sorry.
Well, no. Yeah, just tell people about your background with the arts and how does that kind of segue into freedom and creating a world that works for all of that.
Okay. Well, when Rick invited me to join We the World, what really, in terms of how I was going to approach the Freedom Campaign, my first question is, what are we doing with the freedom that we have? And sort of starting from that place. And for me, my artist practice is very much the foundation of much of my work because it's allowed me to continue in it and not lose my mind. And when I bring that away and just kind of, you know, sort of linear mind thinking and way of approaching things, I think that we are missing our best opportunities for advancement. And that is the surest way to burnout. For myself, that was what I found. So with the Cure for Racism, bringing it in as a way to help people to confront things that are difficult for them to acknowledge and confess, and doing a way to create more safety around developing a journaling practice to cultivate that kind of self-awareness and process the things that you need to process if systemic racism is ever going to be a thing that we, you know, aren't living with. Also using art as a way to reframe conversations, to look at things differently. And so for my work with Empowered Innovation, I use a soul food framework. So I reframe things in terms of recipes, which are your solutions and your outcomes, and the ingredients that go into them. And then whatever you do is the process, that's the cooking. And so did this with racism, and that's where A Cure for Racism, which was is a webinar, and that project is ongoing. And that's sort of like a little masterclass session in that. And then there's a book that has a workbook that goes with it. And then as Jim was talking about, I will definitely want to connect with him to see what's possible, but with the embodied performance, that we did, for the Day of Global Unity, I think it was, or the week, it was the week of global, was it the week of global unity?
Probably 11 days last year.
No, it wasn't, it was this year. It was the one that we did like a few months ago.
I know. Unity Earth did World Unity Week.
That's what it was, World Unity
Yes.
Week, that's it. So for that, we did the embodied performance, which was very much about what you guys were talking about before. And I think Rabbi Lerner that's coming on later will go even more into that. But the notion that, because there was all this stuff happening and I saw people just reacting out of the anger and the fervor of immediate action, you need to do something now. And just the thing that maybe you learn just with maturity is that's not always the best course of action. Of course, if some, if blood's flirting everywhere, you need to bandage it up and deal with that. But coming from with Theory U, Otto Schromer's work with the Presencing Institute, that they have a whole, list of people that teach about the outcome that you get is directly related to the place within that you're coming from as you're taking that action. And so the embodied performance was kind of looking at that with the notion of performance and embodiment and bringing that together. And that's very much how I like to engage people from whatever profession or industry they're coming from. When you bring that level of awareness that I think of as the artist mind, which is more open, it's looking for how to include whatever is present, then everybody can engage with whatever their discipline is at that level as an artist. Your work then becomes your art, your life is your art. And so I think that with that, you change your mind, change your life. You know what I mean? It's kind of like following that same line of thinking. How do we move from a place of having been conditioned to exclude and discriminate to a place of inclusion and appreciation for diversity? Natural for artists. So when you adapt more of an artist mind, all of those things look differently. Again, in cooking, if you have something that doesn't, like a bitter herb or something that you need to include in the recipe, then the objective becomes, do you eliminate that ingredient, or is there something you can do to mitigate that bitterness? And so when you start to look at things that way, and so with the artist research project that is related in some ways to the embodied performance, I'm really a couple of artists that I've connected with recently in Scotland. One's in Scotland and one is in Oklahoma, and they are crochet maniacs. They love crocheting, but they're very interested in taking crochet out of the realm of baby boots and baby blankets and really looking at it. And so one of the woman in Scotland has engaged me in her pirate thing. So looking at using her metaphor. So the idea with the artist research project is to look at social justice issues and to reimagine that usually social justice issues are resolved in courtrooms. And so if we take that courtroom process and we use some established precedents as a basis to create a new narrative and to see that totally different. So we're exploring what we're going to do and how we can mess with that, with combining crochet and pirates. So that's kind of crazy and fun. But the idea there is that we need to think about social justice differently. And it's really, really hard to get people to see beyond that. So we start out with the traditional narrative of so for example, with corporate responsibility, we have a Supreme Court that has said that a court has like the right to have like a political, not just a political presence, but a political voice. But their voices are stronger than our voices, right? That's the reality, but nobody has defined what their responsibilities are. If they are granted corporate personhood, I say that we take on that responsibility and define what the responsibilities are of corporate personhood. And then we set out like, how do we enforce that? And so I think that this might be a more, not just fun, but there's so much stress, there's so much anxiety related to all of this stuff that we have to find a way to, have like an outlet for that as well, not just look at the action that needs to be taken, because people will burn out. And as you know, this isn't a game. Oops, sorry, I did not mean to turn my video off there. This is not the kind of thing, you have to plan for self-care and including strategies to avoid burning out.
Exactly. So do you want to give a place where people can connect with you or your podcast or any of the different things that you're working on? What would be a good way for people to connect with you?
Probably the easiest, quickest way to reach out and get a response would be on social media. Instagram, I check more often than Facebook. So if you message me on Facebook, it might be a month before I respond. You can always email me through Yvette Dubelle at we.net. Or Instagram, Twitter. I think I get Twitter notifications. I would say those would be like probably the best. And of course, you can go to webantiphon.com or empoweredinnovation.org to reach out to me. And anybody, I see some comments, so I will read those after I'm done talking to Rick when it's Teresa's turn.
All right. That sounds good. So let's now bring in Teresa Castro. Why don't you turn on your video and audio, Therese? And I believe that you have been working on graphics for We the World. Is that correct, Therese?
Yes, I've been working on graphics and being part of the social media team since last year, actually. I think this month. So it's already 1 year anniversary for me.
Great, that's fabulous. And working directly with Callum, I'm sure, and Angel, and all of those folks. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and in particular, what has brought you in your life to step up and make a contribution to creating a world that works for all like this by working with We the World?
All right, so yes, my name is Therese. I'm 24 years old and I am tuning in here from Metro Manila, Philippines. So I'm quite a long way, and it's really wonderful to be a part of a global community and be able to connect with all of you. So I am a master's in international studies in Miriam College, and I specialize, well, my major is development studies and my minor is gender studies. So currently I have been freelancing, and I am a content specialist right now with a company named Digital Silk. So aside from that, I consider myself a creative. So I really love that, that art has come up. And to also hear that you, Rick, you're a musician, that's really wonderful. I'm a musician as well. I play Renaissance, medieval, Baroque ukulele. I also play dulcimer bass, and I'm learning harp right now. I'm also a singer and also an artist. I have ADHD. I'm neurodivergent, so I have a lot of interests. And something that has also come up, like thank you, Yvette, for the wonderful discussion about art. You've also mentioned art as a way to, you know, as a way of exercising your freedom, and I connect with that. You know, one of the mediums of art, and I'm not sure if people consider this as an art, but I do like taking self-portraits, and I know that sounds funny, but there was this wonderful video by it was an interview, and I really regret not being able to remember the nationality of this woman, but she was I think she was from Iran, and I will link it if I can find that video because I think it's really important. So she is a makeup artist in, you know, in this country where you know, there are some limited ways for women to express their freedom in a way that is different from the mold or the standard there. And I love how she you know, through Instagram, through social media, sharing her art, her makeup artistry on herself, on others. It's a way for her to practice her freedom it's really wonderful seeing that in a different light, how this ability to even make a post to say, I don't like this, I like that. It's a way we don't really see that as a freedom, but it is. And I relate with that. And it really changed my approach and my guilt to, wanting to take photos. And currently I like dressing up in Victorian fashion. I should have worn some of that today. And it's just a way for me to, play and express. And yeah, I think that being part of this global community, being part of We the World, um I really do hope that um well, not hope, but I know that we are also through these, connections that we are building, we are allowing um other people to um explore their freedoms, what freedom means to them, by, collating these ideas. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
That's so wonderful. Thank you. And yes, I would love to see your Victorian outfit.
It's in my
Outfits.
Instagram.
Interesting, right? So, and it's interesting. Yeah, I was kind of curious what you thought of what Jim and I were talking about with the
Uh-huh.
situation of freedom in the United States that we've been discussing. How does that look to you and people around you in the Philippines? What is that? What do you think about, hearing about all that?
It is very timely, this discussion, because recently there was a personality named Tony Gonzaga, and she interviewed a former dictator of ours in this country, former President Marcos, and it was quite a hot issue, because there is an issue about historical revisionism and also suppression and dissent. There's this debate, like, should people like this be given a platform to speak and all that, but I think it really all boils down to the treatment of those who of those people under who experience the horrors of that regime, such as there was this book called The Conjugal Dictatorship, that was revealing all the injustices, the tortures that happened during the Marcos regime. And this author went missing, and his son was brutally murdered. And it's really struck a chord and brought back this discourse. But in I think something that is also relevant, well, there's a lot of freedom issues in the Philippines, but there is also this ongoing issue of the the murders of environmental defenders, because there's a lot of international companies like Standard Chartered that is, doing illegal mining in this country, destroying our resources. So this is British companies, um, and I think there's also a Canadian one, um, you know, uh, destroying resources here, and these environmental defenders that are speaking out, and even those workers. There is uh, around since 2001 to 2019, there's around 272 of them who have gone missing. And besides that, there's also President Duterte, which is the current regime that we're in, and the extrajudicial killings. So there is that issue of people who are using their voice, using their freedom to to showcase, not showcase, but to um, reveal and bring to light these issues that are going on in the government, things that are wrong, but they are met with violence, with suppression.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that that was in the news some time ago, but these
Mhm.
things drop out of the news. The idea that allowing people to shoot anyone they thought was a drug dealer.
Yeah, that
That's
is a huge issue till this day.
so. So there has not been much movement to end that where you are.
There has been a lot of protests, but um, still, it remains an issue. And the thing that is very what's a word I can describe it? It's very intriguing because this um this drug war that the president is doing, because there is a drug issue, he believes, but the thing is the people who are being killed for these are not the drug lords, or they're usually they are innocents, or they are people who are suspected, or um people who are poor. There, it's more like a war on poverty, which is very strange. Because you can just see how cruel that is and how unfair that is, because it's not really going to the root cause. There are many reasons why people will turn to drugs or drug selling. By killing those people, it doesn't help the problem. It just actually gives more power to the people who are at the source of that, and causing a lot of grief and pain for the families who suffer that.
Exactly, which is so unfortunate. But well, we do the best we can and connect with people who are working to create a better world. And so we thank you for everything you've been doing and working with Callum and the social media team and everything. It's really great. And by the way, one of the people who helped to launch 11 Days of Global Unity is from the Philippines. Um, um, her name just went out of my head, but anyway, so I was thinking about her, Gemma Bulos, and she works
Oh,
with
wonderful.
women and especially with regard to water issues. She works with women around the world. Do you have you ever heard of her or not really? Probably not, right?
No, I have not.
So, but it just occurred to me to mention that. But
Mm,
anyway, so thank you and good luck with everything
thank you
in the
as well.
Philippines. So as we kind of finish up here, I want to thank Jim again and invite Jim to come in to kind of close us out. And before we finish up, I want to let people know that again, to see the full list of events that have been happening during 11 Days of Global Unity. So you can watch the recordings, see what's coming up by going to we.net. And coming up really in less than an hour, we're going to have a really amazing conversation with Rabbi Michael Lerner and Peter Gable. Rabbi Michael Lerner is the founder of the Network for Spiritual Progressives and the editor of Tikkun magazine, and has been involved at the highest levels of social change for decades. Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States, and Hillary Clinton in the 1980s, they were very much influenced by Tikkun magazine and the ideas that Michael Lerner and Peter Gable developed, known as the politics of meaning. And they were very interested in that. They kind of abandoned it once they got into office, but it was part of what their message was when Bill Clinton was running for office in 1992. So this will be a really amazing conversation in about an hour from now, right? Here, the same station, same time, same place that you're watching this, you can watch that. So I turn it over to you, Jim. Why don't you close us out? Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Therese and Yvette. These were both powerful statements from each of you. And starting with you, Therese, I just want to acknowledge what you're doing there in the Philippines. According to Global Witness, Philippines is one of the top countries in the world that is killing environmental and human rights activists, along with Colombia and Peru, Nigeria, and a few other countries, and which is of deep concern, I imagine, to you. And I wanted to just underscore the point that you were making about what President Duarte is doing there, because it's so reminiscent of what's happening around the world. You know, they declare these vaunted war on drug policies, but they don't go after the drug lords. They don't go after the cartels. They go after the poor men and women who are so far down the food chain as to be essentially inconsequential. So it becomes really a war on poverty and poor people, and a war on indigenous people, and a war on the people who are already impoverished and are marginalized. And it just deepens the crisis. It erodes civic virtue, and it adds to the corruption that is already in place, that's given rise to the drug problem in the first place, but avoids any meaningful solutions. So I just want to appreciate your courage in pointing that out. And I think it's you spoke deep truth to power today, and I just want to acknowledge that courage on your part. And if there's any way that we can support you through either a scholarship in one of our programs, please be in touch with us, because you're the kind of person that we want to support and nurture in any way that we can as we move into a future where, as we all know, with rising ecological turbulence, we're also seeing rising political authoritarianism. And whether it's in the Philippines or the United States, we're all now in the grip of a global assault on freedoms as we've known it. So keep on keeping on, and we're here to support you in any way that we can. And then Yvette, I want to salute you and everything that you're doing there in North Carolina. I mean, you are in the South, where it's particularly challenging for any person of color to take up the standard and make a real difference. And I think one comment that you made to me is seminal, and one that I would like to close with in terms of your remark that we just simply have to start by using the freedom that we do have. You know, that's really profound. You know, we're in a world of diminishing freedom, but we still have some. And the great avatars of freedom around the world, whether it's Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Nelson Mandela, Malala, young girl in Pakistan, you know, the different activists that we all know, they simply used the freedom that they did have and moved out from there. And that's important in two ways, in my view. Number one, no matter where you are and what your circumstance is, you're accountable for the freedom that you do exercise. There's never an excuse not to exercise the freedom that you do have. We're seeing that with Therese today. She's in a remarkably authoritarian country, and she's exercising her freedom. We're seeing it with Yvette, in the South, one of the most racist countries in history, the United States of America, and she's exercising her freedom. And that is what all of us were doing. We're doing it today in this partnership between Humanity Rising and 11 Days of Global Unity. We're speaking truth to power as best we can. Do we know the whole truth? No, we don't. Do we have as much power as we would like? No, we don't. But we're using what we have on a Sunday morning to do everything in our capacity, knowing that we stand as dwarfs on the shoulders of giants in the past. And that leads to the second point with which I'd like to close, and that is that if all of us do what Therese and Yvette are doing, just working within our own small little ponds, that stone that we drop ripples out, and it connects with other ponds and other stones that are dropping. So every time you commit to doing something, however large, however small, whatever shape and size, it's the integrity with which you act, that all of us, with which we act, that somehow in some mysterious way of entanglement, as it's called in physics, interacts with all the other acts of integrity around the world. And that's the web of truth, the Indra's net of activism that somehow, in a mysterious way that I don't think any of us can imagine or can imagine, is working a deep will for the survival and redemption of humanity at this critical time. So Therese and Yvette, thank you for your courage. You are models of how activism in the name of freedom should be embodied in our critical time. Rick, once again, thank you. Another splendid program. Good luck with Michael Lerner. And we'll meet again tomorrow for the penultimate theme on disarmament. And I'm going to be speaking more fully on some of the shadow content of 9/11 and the layers that we need to take in. Was it just Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda that were involved in 9/11? Was it an inside job? Were there other players involved in this very complex, multi-dimensional act that changed our world? So that'll be tomorrow on Humanity Rising as we enter our 10th and penultimate day for this program. So thank you, everyone. You're all welcome to join Stan Pokris and Shannon and others in the after session chat group. And you'll see the link in the chat box. Thanks so much. See you tomorrow. Bye for now. Thank you, Rick. Therese, Yvette, thank you so much.